What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly update and the first one of 2018. So I hope you all had a very safe and happy new year, and I wish you all the best for this new year. But I'm going to get right into the news this week. Usually I start with the headline story, but this week I'm not going to because I want to get into some other stuff first. But if you're interested in the Nissan Brain 2 vehicle technology, you can use the timestamps in the description below to skip ahead to that segment of the video. But first, the first thing is Infiniti has finally revealed their concept they're going to be showing at the Detroit Auto Show here in a little over a week. And so it's going to be called the Q Inspiration Concept, and thankfully it's a sedan. It's not a crossover like everything else these days, and it's a very beautiful sedan as well that looks like it might have some type of a fastback shape to it there. You know, might have a hatchback, might not, who knows. It's just a concept, and Infiniti says this is mostly designed to show their future design direction. I think it's just going to influence the future designs that they're going to have. You know, they should have some type of new Q50 replacement coming here, and maybe that's what this is going to be hinting at. But I think it's just mostly the design elements. And we just have the one picture so far. We'll have more pictures here, you know, as it's revealed, I think on January 15th. So anyway, cool to see that. Another vehicle that's going to be revealed at the Detroit Auto Show is the 2019 Mercedes G-Class, but we got some leaked images of it, and they're low res. I apologize, but we'll have the full high-res versions once the car is finally revealed on January 14th at the Detroit Auto Show on that Sunday. Anyway, what you can see is it's very similar to the current G-Wagon. They didn't want to mess with success, you know, and it's always had the old-school type of looks, and so they wanted to keep that. It is modernized, though, with some little outer LED rings, similar to actually what we see on the new Jeep Wrangler, with those new headlights on those. But it does look good, you know, and again, we'll have to wait till we see the full high-res pictures, and of course, I'll be, you know, showing you guys what it's like in person whenever I'm at Detroit as well, and showing you an up-close look at it. But we also got a couple more pictures of the interior, and they also, Mercedes did actually reveal some pictures of it with camouflage on it still. I'm not sure why, but along with that, they also revealed some additional information about it. So here's that information. They say it's still going to retain a ladder type frame, and it's going to have three 100% differential locks and still have a low range as well. And even though they're going to still have the solid rear axle on it, it now has front independent suspension with double wishbones. And so that's kind of a tricky thing because, you know, you want to have high ground clearance to make sure this is still a very good off-roader, but you don't want it to handle like some, you know, vehicle from the 70s. So that's why they're kind of trying to advance this platform here. So they said that to keep the ground clearance high, they have double wishbones that the engineers directly fixed to the ladder frame, and they did it without a suspension subframe and used special attachment points instead to achieve the highest mounts possible. So that's how they're able to work that in. It still has a new solid rear axle, but it has been reworked there, and it has 4 longitudinal control arms and a panhard rod. And so still going to be a very capable off-roader, but should drive a little nicer. Also, they said there's a new G mode that you can have on these, and so that engages automatically once one of the 3 differential locks is engaged, or if you engage the low range. And that'll adapt the dampening. It'll be all adjustable with the dampening, steering, throttle, and transmission, as far as, you know, the settings for all those things. Also, the infotainment system now is going to have a 360-degree off-roading camera, similar to what you see on the Land Rover type vehicles, where it's going to have a readout for ride height, gradient, angle, steering angle, and compass. And it's also going to be getting the 9-speed automatic transmission Mercedes revealed, although they didn't, you know, they just said that it's going to have different gear ratios, so it'll, you know, be better suited. You know, it won't just be the same ratios out of any other Mercedes. It'll be specially designed for the G-Wagon there as well. So anyway, interesting to see that. Another SUV that was spied was Jeep was spied testing whatever their 3-row SUV is going to be called. They showed the Untitled concept that's for China, but this might be something different, and could still be called the Grand Wagoneer. That's what we've been hearing, or the Wagoneer. Anyway, we only have 3 images of it here, spy images by Brenda Pretty, and so basically it looks like it's very similar in shape to the Durango, and with everyone wanting to rush out a 3-row crossover, it makes a lot of sense that they would just take the Durango and reskin it. As lame as that might sound, I think it's the smartest, most cost-effective, and quickest way to get something out instead of doing something completely unique. Again, 3-row crossover, people don't care what the platform is. They don't care about the handling. None of that matters. They just want a Jeep badge that looks like a Jeep and has 3 rows. And I think this should fit that perfectly. And so why overcomplicate it, I suppose. It looks pretty far along though, so honestly, I mean, I doubt it'll be shown at Detroit. We know the 2019 Jeep Cherokee refresh will be shown at the Detroit Auto Show, and that's supposedly their big reveal, but they do have an hour-long press conference, so they could have a few surprises up their sleeve, including this. Otherwise, we know that the Chicago Auto Show is also one where a lot of trucks and SUVs are revealed. That's the next month. That could also make sense, or it could be sometime later, but anyway, interesting to see that spied. Mercedes was spied testing the AMG GT Sedan, or GT4, or whatever they're going to be calling this new sedan version of the AMG GT. And so it looks like it's still going to have a hatch similar to, you know, the standard AMG GT Coupe, and looks, you know, pretty similar to the concept, honestly. It looks much better than the CLS, which is a relief. I think the CLS and this are going to have a lot of overlap, although this should be more performance-oriented, but still, not sure how the CLS is going to do with this new one coming out here. But anyway, it looks pretty far along there as well, and that's something that I'm guessing we'll see at the Geneva Motor Show. Could be later on in the year. We'll have to wait and see, but anyway, cool to see that running around. There's a little bit more news on the GT500 here this past week, thanks to, once again, the Ford Motorcraft Service website. So Ford is posting this stuff up, and people are discovering it. So I'm not sure if this is a deliberate leak by Ford or just really dumb oversights by some people. I don't know. Anyway, some of the new info we gleaned here about the GT500. In the speedometer verification procedure, that's a service thing for these vehicles, supposedly for the GT500, it's showing that it's going to be able to go over 200 miles an hour because there's a verification process for that speed. Also, it's noted in the engine diagram that was shown last week that it could actually, it's going to be using a flex plate instead of a flywheel in that diagram, which suggests some type of automatic. Some people are saying it looks like it could be used for a dual clutch setup similar to the Ford GT Supercar, but considering it sounds like this GT500 might be going more towards a Hellcat fighter than a ZL1 fighter. So I could see, you know, if you want it to be consistently better at the drag strip, I think the 10-speed automatic might be better suited over the 7-speed dual clutch. But, you know, who knows? Maybe they could optimize it and I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But anyways, that's another thing that they saw here. And hopefully, of course, there'll still be a manual offered. I'm really hoping and, you know, expecting. Also, there's in these documents, it suggests that a heads-up display is going to be a part of the GT500, which a lot of people are really excited about, but it sounds like it's going to be the same exact one that's in the GT350. The GT350 already has a little heads-up display, but all it is a shift light that starts blinking yellow and red once you get closer to the red line there. And so that's something that is already existing and should just be transplanted over to the GT500. It doesn't sound like it's any more advanced than that, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe they do have something a little more advanced up their sleeve. Speaking of the GT350, though, it sounds like, according to these documents that everyone's finding again, it sounds like the GT350 is going to be killed off after 2018. And the GT500 will kind of take its place in the lineup, which shouldn't be a big surprise, considering, you know, they completely neglected to give the Shelby the refreshed headlights and, you know, taillights of the 2018 Mustang lineup, and is continuing on with the old looks, which, I mean, they're still spectacular looking vehicles, but it's just, you know, obviously they weren't investing in the redesign because clearly the GT350 wasn't going to be sticking around much longer, otherwise they would have. So I think that makes total sense. And so anyway, interesting to hear all of that. Some other Ford news, though, is there's a little update here on the future of the Fusion, which over the past few weeks has come into question with all this these confusing reports that Ford's been putting out and all this stuff. So anyway, the newest news here is from the Detroit News. So they got their hands on a letter that was sent to suppliers in November. In the letter, Ford says that it's canceling a North American redesign for a 2020 Fusion. So this could go a couple of different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean the Fusion is dead, but that sounds likely. So, you know, in their previous press releases over the past couple of weeks, they said they're going to be starting to slim down the lineup, offer less options as a starting point, and then they're going to kill off and invest less in cars and put that money more into SUVs, trucks, and EVs. That's part of this new CEO's, you know, what he's planning on doing. Anyway, so to talk about this a little more, the Detroit News also cited an unnamed source, so this is more shaky news here, but this is basically saying that the Fusion of Mondeo will continue on for another 3 or 4 years, supposedly, but that's about as long as I think it's going to stick around for, because Ford already announced they're moving production of the Fusion and Mondeo, which are the same thing. They're moving that production from, I think they're built in like Spain or something, to China. But Ford has said repeatedly that they are not going to be shipping Chinese-built Fusions to the United States. They're not doing it, which means they're either going to have to come up with some kind of other production facility and some type of other plan for the Fusion last minute here, you know, because 2020 is not that far off. So they'll have to do that real quick, or it's just going to get killed off. So it sounds like it's getting killed off. You know, the Fusion was never the sales leader of the midsize class, and the midsize sedan segment is shrinking quick. And so it doesn't make me too surprised to hear that it sounds like the Fusion is on its way out, probably by 2020. So just crazy if Ford would not have a midsize sedan. That would just be wild. But these are the times we're living in. So anyway, interesting to hear that. Other Ford news is there's a picture taken of the new Ranger, just one shot there of the back end during what appears to be a photo shoot. It was taken by Mike K, who sent it into Jalopnik, so you can see it clearly has different taillights than the test mules, and some of the vehicles you see, the Australian versions and stuff, all have different taillights. So I've been seeing a couple people that have actually been sending me in pictures of Rangers that were spotted in the States, but they had the old, the Australian taillights, and those are most likely just foreign cars. This looks like the first actual view of the new redesign changes for the Ranger for America specifically. And we'll hopefully be seeing the whole thing at the Detroit Auto Show once again. But Ford is one of the last few automakers that hasn't announced what they're bringing to Detroit and hasn't put out any teasers or anything. Every single other car company other than Kia and Nissan, and Kia kind of might have something, but Nissan and Ford are really the only ones that haven't said what they're bringing to Detroit yet. So Ford is keeping us guessing, but we basically are still pretty sure it's going to be the Bullitt Mustang, the Ranger, and possibly the GT500, but that's a little more of a leap. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, cool to see that, you know, the Ranger is slowly starting to get revealed here, at least if it's no other way than from spy photos. Speaking of smaller trucks, though, Ward's Auto was talking with Michael Bunce, who's the Senior Vice President of Product Planning for Nissan North America, and he was talking about the Xterra, and he said about the Xterra that it is a great asset in terms of a name and a badge. It's on the shelf right now, but it's something we could utilize in the future. Which is interesting. So it sounds like they're considering bringing back the Xterra. You know, also, it continues to go on saying that, you know, Ward's Auto is expecting the new Frontier to be revealed at some point this year. I guess they're working on one. We haven't seen anything spied yet. So I'm not sure where they're getting that info from, because the Frontier is severely outdated and definitely due for an update. But Nissan's just kind of been letting it die on the vine for a while now, but we'll have to wait and see. You know, maybe they will have something new this year. Could be even a surprise to Detroit. We'll have to see, since, you know, like I said, Nissan still hasn't announced what they're bringing. And anyway, this new Frontier supposedly is what the Xterra is going to be based on. And so there's also a possibility that both the Frontier and the Xterra could use a new, smaller turbo V6, since this Mr. Bunce mentioned that the Ford EcoBoost V6s are great engines in the segment, and that it opens up the door to us to look at alternatives as well. So again, we don't know what Nissan's bringing to the Detroit Auto Show. We do know they have a press conference scheduled, so maybe, you know, they'll be surprising us with one of these. We'll have to wait and see, but anyway, interesting to see that. But the really crazy news this week from Nissan is that they announced their brain-to-vehicle technology that they're going to be revealing here at the Consumer Electronics Show next week. And so they have a video about it, and I'll link the video. You can watch it for yourself, but basically, it sounds like their goal is that they want to anticipate what a driver wants to do before they do it, and basically, like, they want to capitalize on the milliseconds between when you think about what you're going to do and you actually doing it. So this has safety applications, of course. So like the second that you are like, oh crap, I gotta hit the brakes, and between that time and when you actually hit the brakes is when the car wants to step in and help you out, which, I mean, is milliseconds. I get that maybe milliseconds make the difference, you know, when it comes to emergency situations and things like that. But just seems like really complicated for such a small task. But they went on to say that it also could make driving more engaging. And so, you know, they're saying that also, like, if you're trying to accelerate, you know, you think about, oh, I want to go faster. you thinking that will make the car say, okay, let's go faster, or it'll kind of judge whether you want a different driving mode and all that kind of stuff. But it's just, again, so overly complicated. And again, with this, it's reading your brain waves and stuff, so you have to have something on. I don't think they'll be able to read brain waves without some type of apparatus on your head, at least not currently. So it's just like, what's wrong with hitting a drive mode button? I'd rather do that than wear some weird hat to put me in the drive mode by thinking it. Like, it's a little weird. I don't know. I think what this is kind of trying to do is laying the groundwork for autonomous cars. They keep mentioning in this video about, oh, it'll make for a more engaging autonomous driving experience. So I think what this is trying to do is eventually get to the point where maybe if you don't have to wear something somehow, but you're in an autonomous car way off in the future and you don't have a steering wheel or pedals to take over yourself, but for whatever reason you're like, oh, I want to slow down, or I want to go faster, or I want to stop the car, you can just think that and it'll say, okay, and immediately stop it and do all that stuff for you. Or whether it's, you know, if you're stuck behind slow traffic and you're like, man, go around this car, and the car will say, okay, I'll go around this car. I don't know, something like that I think is kind of where they're going with this. But again, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but what's wrong with a steering wheel and pedals, or, you know, a turn signal stalker, just doing these things yourself? It's almost like, you know, with the touch-sensitive volume buttons, and everyone's like, no, just go back to a normal volume knob. Like, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. You know, but I think they said they want to make autonomous driving more engaging, and I guess that's better than having no control over the drive experience at all and just, you know, having this thing just have a mind of its own, I suppose. But none of this sounds fun to me at all. But anyway, they're gonna have more info on this to come next week, and more details at the Consumer Electronics Show. Speaking of autonomous cars, though, Hyundai and Volkswagen have actually announced a joint partnership with Aurora, which is this Silicon Valley startup that's working on autonomous vehicle technology and all that kind of stuff. And Volkswagen didn't say anything about this except that they're included in it somehow, but Hyundai said that they're going to be using the technology and they're going to integrate it into custom developed models that'll use this technology. The first application is going to be in their new fuel cell crossover that we've seen and is already on the streets in Korea, I believe, but it's not here in the States. But they're going to be revealing what they're going to call it here in the States at the Consumer Electronics Show next week. And anyway, they're planning here to have level 4 autonomous vehicles, which means no human input is required, basically. And that's going to be starting off in pilot smart cities by 2021. Now, I don't know if that's testing starting in 2021 or what, but it's still, you know, Volvo pushed their program back 4 years. And, you know, with this now, this is about 4 years away, too. So hopefully, this is just a test. And again, we're still ways off from having these fully autonomous cars that drive themselves. At least 10 years before they start getting to be mainstream on higher end stuff. I'm thinking it's, you know, even farther off than that. But anyway, interesting to hear that they're working on that. So actually more, I think, practical new information here from Hyundai is they actually just officially announced this past week that they have this new airbag they developed for panoramic sunroofs. So the airbag deploys at the rear of the roof and will deploy in like 0.08 seconds, I think is what they said. And anyway, it's basically they've noticed that in rollover accidents, you know, whether or not the roof is open, just the fact that you have a piece of glass that's not going to protect you as well as metal will, you know, means that they want to use this airbag to, one, help pad your head in rollovers, even if you are belted, but also just so you don't fly out of the vehicle if, you know, somehow you get, you know, knocked around or whatever, and, you know, to also just protect your head better in the event of a rollover, which I find very commendable, especially considering this past year, you know, I have a whole new appreciation for roof strength and safety, thanks to the tree that tried to kill me. And so I think this is a really cool idea. And so who knows when they're going to start implementing this in vehicles. It'll most likely start off in stuff like the Genesis line, most likely, and then work its way down as they see fit. But I think it's a very good, makes a lot of sense, because more and more cars have these panoramic sunroofs, and it's just like, well, now all you have protecting your head is a piece of glass, and that's it. Obviously, there's still a steel cage there, but as far as objects poking through, or, you know, you poking out of objects, I think this is a really great idea. So cool to see that. Last little Hyundai news here is I got 2 more pictures of the new Veloster that were sent in to me by Javier Haro, and they're still low resolution images here, but it gives you another good idea of what to expect. We had some leaked images last week of it on a photo shoot, and this is what Hyundai is going to be revealing at the Detroit Auto Show here in a little over a week, and we'll have all the details on it then, but cool to see those, and thanks to him for sending those in to me. Kia has some new news this week. So they teased a new Niro EV concept they're going to be showing at the Consumer Electronics Show next week. And this could also be what they're bringing to the Detroit Auto Show, because they have a press conference scheduled for Detroit, but they didn't announce or tease what they're bringing to that yet. So maybe that's just something else that's going to be teased later on, or this could be the same thing. Anyway, speaking of this Niro EV, the teaser images show some styling changes from a regular Niro with these cool new headlights. There's lights in the grille, and there's these cool new running fog light type deals as well. And Kia is talking, it's going to be called this motion graphic lighting technology that Kia is going to be showing off here on this car. So I'm not sure how much of that is going to end up in production, but the idea of a Niro EV certainly sounds very likely for production in the short term here, because the thing about the Niro is it's based on the Ioniq, the Hyundai Ioniq, which is available currently in the hybrid version, the plug-in hybrid, which I just talked about last week, and then there was already a full EV version of that. So this is based on that, and so the only difference is the Niro has an independent rear suspension versus a torsion bar for the EV version to make more room for the batteries on the Ioniq. So all I got to do is swap out the rear suspension there, and just basically transplant that powertrain over there into the Niro body shape, which should be a quick and easy job. And then they have a Niro EV. And with how hot these, everyone's racing to put out a crossover EV, I think this makes a lot of sense and something that you can bet on, making it to market very soon. Speaking of electric crossovers, though, another electric crossover that's being teased for the Consumer Electronics Show is this new one called the Byton SIV. And so it's a Chinese-made crossover that's going to be going on sale next year in China, and that's going to be arriving in the US and Europe supposedly in 2020. There aren't any kind of plans that I saw as far as how they're going to sell these things, since it's a completely new brand. I don't know where they would sell them or what, but that's their plan here. Anyway, this thing's pretty crazy looking. I mean, those headlights with those little intricate LED elements look very cool. It also has a 49-inch touchscreen that features a shared experience for driver and passenger, which presents some safety issues that I can think of. But other things here, it's going to have AirTouch gesture control and intuitive access facial recognition to unlock the car. As far as mechanical stuff goes, it has a 201 horsepower electric motor in the front and a 268 horsepower motor in the rear. So the base model is going to have a 71 kilowatt hour battery, and that's good for about 200 miles of range, they say. And there's also going to be a 95 kilowatt hour battery, and that one's good for 310 miles of range. So, it should be very competitive with the Model 3 Tesla and all the other Tesla offerings and basically every other EV offering out there. So if this thing can actually come to the United States and have a lot of these same elements for the production version, I think they actually have a really good chance, despite it being Chinese built and that being kind of a new thing for Americans here. I think it definitely has some potential. So anyway, interesting to see that. Speaking of electrified crossovers, though, Lexus has some pretty big news here for the 2018 RX450h, which is just the hybrid version, not fully electric or anything like that. But it's getting some big price cuts. So the 2017 model, I guess, didn't sell as well as they want. I'm not sure what happened, but they're really incentivizing people to go for the hybrid here for 2018. So the 2018 version of the RX450h is going to be $7,340 less than the 2017 model, starting at $46,690. And then the F Sport hybrid, which is a little sportier, of course, gets a price cut that's smaller of $4,090, and that starts now at $53,400. And then if you want to go for a regular non-hybrid RX350, those are actually going to be $50 more expensive than last year, so basically no change. But they're still going to end up being cheaper. They're starting at $44,670, but for roughly an extra $2,000, you get a little more power. You get the hybrid powertrain. Making it only a $2,000 upgrade now, I think might entice a lot more people to go for one over, I guess, what used to be a $9,000 upgrade, which is understandable. There wouldn't be a lot more of takers. Not too many people would be interested in that if it's that much more expensive. So it makes a lot of sense here. I think they're also incentivizing people to go for the hybrid to help with their corporate MPG rating. If everyone's driving the hybrid version now and the RX is their #1 selling vehicle, then all of a sudden you have much better corporate fuel economy averages, which helps with all the pressure that's being put on these car companies by the government and whatnot. So anyway, it's definitely good, from a consumer standpoint, aside from the fact that it could hurt resale value. I mean, if you got a $7,000 drop, any 2017 hybrid versions essentially have just lost $7,000 in value. And so not great for owners of 2017 hybrids, but for those that are buying one new, you're about to get a really great deal if you're interested in one of those. So anyway, interesting to see that. And the last story this week is actually a follow-up from last week's story about the Alfa Romeo 4C. I mentioned how they're planning on doing a refresh for 2019, and so I guess Auto Express was talking more with Roberto Fedeli, who's the technical chief for Alfa Romeo. And he expanded more beyond just the fact that it's going to get a refresh for the 2019 model year. So he talked about a next-gen version of it, and he said, in order to complete the Alfa range of products, we need another couple of pillars. Something in the C segment, and then obviously a sporty product, a very sporty product. I like that emphasis. So the C segment one, what they currently have in the C segment for Europe is the Alfa Romeo Giulietta, which is a hatchback. So maybe a new version of the Giulietta could come over here to the United States. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But basically what it would be competing with is something like the Audi A3, Mercedes CLA, something in that segment is kind of what I guess they're saying they need to fill a gap there. So something that's slot beneath the Giulia. And so, we'll have to wait and see what that turns out to be. But obviously the more interesting one is this very sporty product, according to him. So he went on a little bit more, though. He added that being in the market with that kind of car is not a choice. We have to do it. We have to have a pure sporty car. Which is really wonderful to hear. And so he says there's a few options they're currently working on. He said, we make some small modifications, but then we have to decide if we want to install a different engine or switch the architecture. He's talking about the 4C. So the 4C, getting the refresh here this year or whatever for the 2019 model year. And then what do they do from there? He's saying they could just put a bigger engine in it, or they could do a completely new architecture and car and, make something different. Which I think, honestly, as cool as it would be to see a 4C with, the Giulia's either 280 horsepower or even better yet, the Giulia Quadrifolio's, nearly 500 horsepower output there, I think that would be really cool. But I think they'd be better off from a sales perspective to make it a little softer. The 4C was a ton of fun when I drove it, but it was also pretty raw and hardcore. There's no power steering. It's a rough ride. There's very little practicality. The trunk is tiny. The front area doesn't have a whole lot there, but it doesn't open, so you don't have any storage capacity up front there either. So not a very practical car, and most people just go for a Cayman instead because you have one trunk in the rear and one in the front that are both massive, it's a lot more comfortable as well. So I think if they made something that was a more fair Cayman fighter, gave it even the Giulia, it's just 280 horsepower is enough. Or if you want to really go bonkers, give it the Quadrifolio motor, find some way to work that in there, and then you really have a very sporty car, as he said. So that would be awesome. We'll have to keep our fingers crossed and see what they end up coming up with. But it's probably going to be a couple years out at least if they are just starting to work on it now. But anyway, very exciting to hear that, and great that Alfa Romeo is sticking with the sporty stuff while everyone else is obsessed with all this, electric crossovers and all that other stuff. So anyway, cool to hear that. But yes, that's it for all the news this week, guys. Let me know your thoughts and everything in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Take care.